If you have been on the internet in the past few years, I am sure you have seen this video. It's a common reaction gif that people on Twitter use when they're excited for something, celebrating something, or proud of something. However, unless you are an NBA fan, you most likely do not know the backstory behind this video. You probably think that it is some highly regarded NBA player, like LeBron James or Steph Kobe, celebrating his team winning the NBA championship. However, it is not. The player featured in the video is a guy named Patrick Beverley, nicknamed Pat Bev, and the clip is not Pat Bev winning the NBA Finals. In fact, he has never even been to an NBA Finals. He also has never been an MVP, been an All-NBA team, or been an All-Star. However, if you googled a list of the top 10 most hated NBA players currently playing, you are almost guaranteed to see his name, so at least he has that going for him. Getting back on track, the clip you see here is also not Pat Bev winning the conference finals, or the semifinals, or even any game in the playoffs. The reason he is celebrating is because he had won a play-in game to get into the playoffs. Now, a win is a win, and Pat Bev has all the right in the world to celebrate a victory. However, I think you can tell that this seems like a massive overreaction to what is essentially a win in the Weenie Hut Jr.'s playoff game. But that's the thing about Pat Bev. He does not care how important the game might be, or how hard the odds are stacked against him, or how much respect or skill the other team has. Pat Bev is going to give 100% effort no matter what.
Bitch, I'm the man. Give me my spot on that throne. They didn't want me to grow. They didn't know I would make all of them go. I did it all on my own. Man, what was you? When I was trapped in my zone, never had nothing to own. Now it's all good. All of that frontin' is gone. I'm out here stunning for show.
Pat Bev was born in July of 1988 and raised in West Garfield Park in Chicago. He attended Waubonsie Valley High School for 1 year before transferring to Josh Marshall Metropolitan High School, where he would shine as a star basketball player. As a senior, Pat Bev led the state of Illinois in scoring at 37.3 points per game, and also averaged 8 steals and 6 rebounds a game. He was also selected to play in the Round Ball Classic, one of the first all-star high school basketball games. His outstanding season would culminate in him leading his high school to a third-place finish in the IHSA playoffs. Because of Pat Bev's promising career, he was recruited to play basketball at the University of Arkansas. As a freshman, he averaged 13.9 points, 4.5 rebounds, and 1.7 steals a game. These stats were good enough for him to receive numerous rookie awards, such as the AP's SEC Newcomer of the Year, the official SEC Rookie of the Year, and second-team All-SEC honors. As a sophomore, Pat Bev would lead his team in rebounds, steals, and three-point percentage, and also helped the Razorbacks advance to the second round of March Madness, although they would be eliminated by the UNC Tar Heels. It seemed like Pat Bev had potential to be drafted into the NBA, but he needed a season or two more under his belt. However, then something weird happened. In August of 2008, the University of Arkansas deemed Pat Bev ineligible to play in the upcoming season due to academic issues. While Pat Bev at first pleaded ignorance, he eventually admitted to having another student write a paper for him in a class. This was a major blow to Pat Bev's reputation, and it also seemingly tanked his chances of joining the NBA. Despite his skills, there were questions about his height, which was just 6'2". Plus, the 2008 NBA draft had just happened, meaning that Pat Bev would need to wait a full year before being able to join the NBA. It seemed like any chance of him going pro ended as soon as he was kicked off of the Arkansas Razorbacks. But Pat Bev was not going to give up on his dream that easily. So, he did what any responsible 20-year-old would do. He dropped out of college, moved to Ukraine, and signed a 6-figure, 1-year deal to play for the basketball club BC Dnipro. Pat Bev was headed to Europe. I understand that 99% of NBA fans do not care about non-American basketball leagues, but at the same time, Pat Bev's time in Europe is a pretty integral part of his story, so I cannot gloss over it. However, I will still try to hit all the major points as quickly as I can. In his year with Dnipro, Pat Bev played in 46 games and managed to make the All-Star game in Ukraine, winning the slam dunk contest. He averaged 16.7 points, 7 rebounds, and 2.2 steals a game. He would then be automatically entered into the 2009 NBA draft, where, thanks to his time in Ukraine, the Los Angeles Lakers would draft him with the 42nd overall pick. However, he would be traded to the Miami Heat before the season, and then cut from the final roster, meaning that he was going to have to spend the foreseeable future in Europe. Pat Bev would then sign with Olympiakos Piraeus, a basketball club in Greece. With the club, he would win the Greek Cup, and also helped his team reach the finals of both the EuroLeague and the Greek League. Despite his team's success, Pat Bev was not a major contributor, only averaging 4.9 points, 2.8 rebounds, and 1.6 assists a game. So, He needed yet another year in Europe in order to strengthen his case for being in the NBA. Thankfully for him, this time things would go much differently. At the start of 2011, Pat Bev signed with Spartak St. Petersburg, a basketball club in Russia, who he would play for over the next 18 months. During this time, Pat Bev became one of the hottest basketball stars in Europe. In 2011, Pat Bev would be named a Russian League All-Star, the Russian League Guard of the Year, the Russian League Defensive Player of the Year, and make the Russian League All-Symbolic First Team. Additionally, he would lead Spartak to a Russian Cup championship that same year. In 2012, Pat Bev's stock only went up, as Spartak would enter the Euro Cup, which led to Pat Bev winning the Euro Cup MVP, making an all-Euro Cup first team, and led the entire league in steals per game at 1.9. Unfortunately, Spartak fell short of making the finals, placing 4th in the competition. Before I move on, I want to emphasize just how tough it was for Pat Bev during this time. During the 3 years he spent in Europe, most of the other star basketball players in the same class as him were either playing in the NBA or decided to move on from basketball. But here Pat Bev was, stuck in some country halfway across the globe, doing whatever it took to revive any semblance of a basketball career he had. You can find interviews Pat Bev gave about having to survive tear gas, lighters, and other objects being thrown at him during his time in Europe. Very few players would be willing to submit themselves to this kind of treatment, even if they were much more gifted at basketball than Pat Bev. But he managed to push through the hardship and ended up earning the respect of NBA scouts, who are always looking for under-the-radar talent to sign to a team. After his remarkable run in Russia, Pat Bev announced that he did not intend on returning to Spartak the following season, and wanted to finally join the NBA. While Spartak at first protested this decision, they agreed to let him go in December of 2012, when Pat Bev was offered a spot on their roster by the Houston Rockets, although he apparently had to pay Spartak $1.4 million, due to contractual obligations with his old team. After playing years of ball in college and European leagues, Pat Bev was finally headed to the NBA. Pat Bev was assigned at first to the Houston Rockets developmental team, and only spent a week there before making his NBA debut on January 15, 2013, in a game against the Los Angeles Clippers. Pat Bev played 2 minutes off the bench, but put up 3 points, 1 assist, and 1 steal. Following this performance, Pat Bev began to get more and more playing time on the Rockets, appearing in 41 games during the regular season. He averaged 5.6 points, 2.7 rebounds, and 2.9 assists a game. When playoff time rolled around, Pat Bev was upgraded to the Rockets starting 5 for the series against the Oklahoma City Thunder, and improved his stats from the regular season. Unfortunately, the Rockets would lose the series in 6 games. However, Pat Bev was undeterred. He had a breakout year and proved that he deserved a spot as a starting player in the NBA. Over the next 4 years, Pat Bev played in over 250 regular games for the Rockets, and he started the vast majority of them. During this time, he averaged around 10 points, 4.2 rebounds, and 3.4 assists a game, and also managed to improve his steals per game from 0.9 in his first season to 1.5 in his fifth. He posted career best in both field goal percentage and 3-point percentage in 2016 at .434 and .400 respectively. His single game career highs throughout this era were 26 points, 6 steals, 13 rebounds, and 12 assists. Pat Bev even won the skills challenge at the 2015 All-Star Game with 2 shocking come-from-behind victories, which is something I am sure people will talk about on the same level as Kobe Bryant's 81-point game years from now. While these stats are nothing to scoff at, they are not exactly All-Star worthy, as people like teammate James Harden could average some of Pat Bev's personal best throughout an entire season. Where he really shined was his defensive skill. Defensive ability is a lot harder to quantify in basketball than offensive ability, but you know it when you see it, and you can see it with Pat Bev. He was able to get into heads of the other team time and time again. He relentlessly went after the other players and stopped at nothing to prevent them from shooting the ball through the hoop. Not only was he physically stopping the other players from scoring, but psychologically, he was also causing them to make more mistakes than they otherwise would have. Because of his defensive prowess, Pat Bev made an all-defensive second team in 2014, and then an all-defensive first team in 2017. Also in 2017, the NBA added in a new award called the NBA Hustle Award, which is meant to reward the player who best utilizes hustle. This just means the player who most frequently dove for loose balls, drew personal fouls on opposing players, contested shots, etc. Essentially, it was an award designed for people who play like Pat Bev, so it is only right that he was the inaugural recipient of this award. While it was not hard to find players who boasted better stats than Pat Bev, you would be hard-pressed to find a more intense, physical player in the league. Of course, being a physical player in the NBA has its drawbacks, to say the least. Pat Bev began to gain a negative reputation in the NBA. While he was liked by some Rockets fans who admired his rough play, the rest of the league viewed him as annoying and reckless. He had notable moments with superstars like Damian Lillard, Steph Curry, and LeBron James, where he seemed to go out of his way to piss them off. I mean, here he is trying to block a free throw attempt from Klay Thompson.
Over the top of screens. And a technical foul has been called. Beverley looking to block the free throw by Thompson is.
However, none of his beefs are more infamous than Pat Bev's feud with 9-time All-Star and 1-time League MVP, Russell Westbrook. Russ was someone who had almost the exact opposite career path as Pat Bev. Russ was a massive star in college and was drafted into the NBA 4th overall the same year Pat Bev traveled to Ukraine. He quickly became a top-tier player for the Oklahoma City Thunder, and he is known for being one of only 2 players to average a triple-double in an NBA season, a feat that Russ has done in 198 individual games and something that Pat Bev has done 0 times. The two met in Pat Bev's first playoff series all the way back in 2013. In the middle of Game 2, Russ was dribbling the ball over to the sidelines in order to call a timeout, when out of nowhere, Pat Bev dove at him in an apparent attempt to steal the ball, knocking Russ over and causing him to injure his knee. While Russ would finish the game, he was diagnosed with a torn meniscus, ending his season on the spot. The Rockets would go on to lose the series anyway, but this was a major blow to the Thunder, and it especially pissed off Russ because he had not missed a game in the NBA since he had been drafted. Ever since then, he and Pat Bev have gone after each other in nearly every single game they're on the opposite teams, with Pat Bev literally doing the exact same thing to Russ multiple times since the incident. Considering I'm making a video about Pat Bev and portraying him relatively positively, I feel a need to clarify that he's entirely in the wrong in this beef. At best, he was being a jackass and over-exaggerated diving for the steal, but at worst, he was purposely trying to injure Russ to take him out of the game. No matter how you slice it, he committed a dirty play that put another player at risk of injury. Of course, the Russ incident was just the biggest example in a long line of trash-talking and highly physical, sometimes dirty play that made Pat Bev despised by everyone outside of Houston. Although pretty soon, a few more people are going to be forced to bend the knee and become Pat Bev fans. Throughout the 5 seasons Pat Bev played this far, the Houston Rockets always made the playoffs, but they were never able to make an NBA Finals. So, the Houston Rockets front office decided they would need to sign or trade for another big player that would work alongside James Harden. They ended up striking a deal with the LA Clippers. In exchange for future Hall of Famer Chris Paul, the Rockets would trade Sam Dekker, Montrezl Harrell, Darren Hilliard, DeAndre Liggins, Lou Williams, Kyle Wiltjer, a 2018 first-round pick, and Pat Bev. Despite 5 years of consistent play and having made an all-defensive first team the previous season, the Rockets threw away Pat Bev as a single piece in a massive trade for a superstar player. Unfortunately for Pat Bev, he could not even translate this frustration into his game, because he ended up out for the season after playing only 11 games for the Clippers. The Clippers ended up missing the playoffs and their future was uncertain as they were still rebuilding. The only good thing is that, against all odds, he was reunited with his former teammate turned rival, Milos Teodosic, who had signed with the Clippers for a short stint in the NBA. When the next season rolled around, the Clippers actually managed to improve, finishing with a better record and sneaking into the playoffs as the 8th seed. Likewise, Pat Bev also had a decent season coming off of injury, keeping up his high energy play. My personal favorite Pat Bev moment during the season was when he jumped down on Dennis Smith Jr. in an attempt to steal the ball, accidentally knocking Smith's tooth out. Just 6 in-game minutes later, Pat Bev would again jump on the ground and dive for a loose ball, although this time, no teeth were lost. The Clippers managed to make the postseason, where they would face off against the Golden State Warriors, who were in the middle of their dynasty of Steph Curry and Kevin Durant. It seemed impossible that the Warriors, a team who had made the NBA Finals 4 years in a row, were going to fall to the Clippers, whose star player was Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, a player who would go another 4 years before being named to an All-Star game. But Pat Bev was not going down without a fight. In Game 1 of the series, Pat Bev would guard the Warriors' star player Kevin Durant, and he employed his usual intense defense. While his efforts were mostly in vain, as the Warriors had a strong lead by the end of the game, Pat Bev was able to block a KD shot from behind late in the 4th quarter. This caused a heated argument to break out between the two, and both players received technical fouls. Less than 20 in-game seconds later, KD would attempt to steal the ball from Pat Bev. This would result in Pat Bev falling on the ground, both players barking at each other again, and both receiving another technical foul. Since this was their second technical foul, KD and Pat Bev were ejected from the game. In a Game 1, Pat Bev not only managed to get himself ejected, but also 13-time All-Star Kevin Durant. Moments like that are why I am making this video. In the following game, the Clippers would come back from a 31-point deficit to win Game 2, tying the series 1-1. This is one of the biggest comebacks in NBA playoff history, and the win can in part be attributed to Pat Bev. While his stats are not very impressive, he was undeterred by his ejection the previous game and continued to pester Kevin Durant and the rest of the Warriors into making numerous offensive mistakes. Already, Pat Bev and the Clippers are putting up a bigger fight than what was expected of them. But unfortunately, that was about where their luck ran out. After a few more games, KD ended up having the best playoff performance of his life, scoring 50 points to seal the series win in Game 6. And even Pat Bev had to acknowledge that KD was simply the better player.
Shelley Smith from ESPN, over here. What more could you have done to slow Kevin down, especially in the first half?
I answer this.
Go ahead. Answer it.
What you think? I mean, he's Kevin Durant.
I promise we tried.
We didn't roll over.
Despite the loss, the Clippers were unfazed. They took 2 games from one of the best dynasties in the NBA, having done so without any superstar players. If they added 1 or 2 star players in the offseason, they could seriously be contenders to win it all. And Pat Bev could have his first real shot at an NBA title since he was with the Rockets. Sure enough, in July of 2019, the Clippers acquired 6-time All-Star Paul George from the Thunder, and signed 2-time Finals MVP and free agent Kawhi Leonard. With a better starting 5, the Clippers massively improved on their previous season, posting a 49-23 record and earned a 2nd seed in the conference. PG-13 and Kawhi would both be named All-Stars, with Kawhi even being named the All-Star Game MVP. Pat Bev also had a stellar season, earning All-Defensive Second Team honors. In the playoffs, the team beat the 7th seed Dallas Mavericks in 6 games, and set a record for most points scored in a single game in playoff history with 154. In the next round, despite a Game 1 loss to the Denver Nuggets, which included Pat Bev contributing 2 technical fouls in 4 seconds late in the 4th quarter, the Clippers found themselves up 3-1 in the series. It was all but guaranteed that they were going to make the conference finals this year. But then, the unthinkable happened.
There's 2 minutes and 10 seconds left in this game and it is over. The Denver Nuggets are up 20! 20! It's over!
The Clippers managed to blow their 3-1 lead. While at the time they were ruthlessly mocked for it, in the grand scheme of things, this major loss seems to mostly have been forgotten. In fact, it's at worst the 3rd most embarrassing 3-1 choke in the last 10 years. It helped that the Clippers were able to bounce back the next season, making it all the way to the Western Conference Finals for real this time, before being eliminated by the favored Phoenix Suns in 6 games. Pat Bev was not a major contributor that regular season, only appearing in about 30 games, and failing to make an all-defensive team. In the postseason, he was no longer a regular starter for the Clippers and experienced his worst playoff averages of all time. However, he did have one notable moment near the end of the Clippers' playoff run that reminded everyone of who he is and what he is about. It's the 4th quarter in Game 6 of the NBA Finals, and the Suns have a massive lead. Suns point guard Chris Paul drains a huge 3-pointer with about 5 minutes left to extend it. As CP3 and the other players walk back to their benches for a timeout, Paul makes eye contact with Pat Bev. 99% of players would have kept on walking. Pat Bev did not keep walking. Out of nowhere, he turns around and shoves Paul from behind, knocking him to the floor. This shove not only got Pat Bev ejected from the game, but also suspended from the opening game of the following season. This ejection was actually not the only one Pat Bev earned when playing against Paul, as earlier that season, it elbowed him to the floor dramatically, which earned Pat Bev an ejection. And earlier in Game 5, Pat Bev knocked Paul over again while he was trying to break through a screen, mocking him for apparently flopping as Paul winced in pain. This did not get him ejected, but he did receive a flagrant foul. It is clear that Pat Bev had major beef with Paul, and this feud has been the subject of a secret base video, who alleged that this beef came from a private one-on-one game the 2 players had played together. But I don't really think that's the case. If you have been paying attention, you might remember Paul as the guy the Houston Rockets traded Pat Bev and half of their roster for to the Clippers years ago. And while Pat Bev exceeded the lackluster expectations placed on him, CP3 was unable to win with the Rockets and was now on his 3rd team since being traded. Chris Paul is an objectively better player than Pat Bev in nearly all aspects of the game, even defense. I do not think there is anyone who would argue against that claim, except maybe Pat Bev. But, despite Paul's clear superiority, when it matters most, Paul is just as useful as any other average schmuck. After beating the Clippers, Paul's Suns would take a 2-0 lead in the NBA Finals before losing 4 straight games in the championship. Fast forward in a bit, the Suns would bounce back with the best record in the league the following season, but suffered an embarrassing loss in Game 7 of the conference semifinals to the Dallas Mavericks, a game in which CP3 scored a single point in the first half. It's okay though, because he managed to sink a clutch 3 in the fourth quarter to cut the lead to 42. Less than 12 hours later, Pat Bev would go on ESPN for a crusade against Paul, claiming that the players are not afraid of him like they were other players. Now, unlike in the past where Pat Bev was always the bad guy in every feud he got into, fans were starting to understand where Pat Bev is coming from. As I made clear in this video, Pat Bev is not that good of a player. But, despite all of his flaws, he plays like he is a star. People like CP3, Russell Westbrook, Devin Booker, James Harden, all these players are some of the greatest players of the past 10 years, but they are constantly criticized for not having a killer mentality. From the outside, they appear unwilling to put in the extra effort and play like their life's on the line when it matters most, despite all of their talents and natural abilities. But, what happens when a player is lacking generational talent but has the coveted killer instinct? You get Pat Bev. After the 2021 season, Pat Bev was traded along with 2 other players to the Memphis Grizzlies for defensive specialist Eric Bledsoe due to Pat Bev's decline and Bledsoe having a good season the year before. Bledsoe is now playing for the Shanghai Sharks, but that's besides the point. Pat Bev was then traded again a week later to the Minnesota Timberwolves, who he would play the following season with. Pat Bev experienced a bounce-back year, setting a new career high for assists per game and becoming an important piece in Minnesota's starting 5. He continued to play rough and hard, getting into numerous showdown matches with players from all across the NBA. The funniest incident he was involved in during this time was when he got into it with Toronto Raptors player Gary Trent Jr., and both players received a technical foul before the game even started. But the real fireworks came in the postseason. First, the Timberwolves had to win their play-in game to make the playoffs, and they were up against none other than Pat Bev's old team, the LA Clippers. What happened next, I'm sure you remember from earlier. In the next round, the Timberwolves faced off against the 2-seed Memphis Grizzlies. They put up a valiant effort, but they lost the series in 6 games. That did not stop Pat Bev from putting up some of the best playoff numbers of his career, and trying to make a mockery out of up-and-coming superstar Ja Morant, repeatedly taunting Morant for being too small to guard him. Despite the early exit, Pat Bev found himself on a promising team for the 3rd time in his career. He had a home in Minnesota, and his postseason performance caused many Timberwolves fans to already start talking about him as if he was a local legend. But, like those other 2 times where a team's front office abandoned Pat Bev, history repeated itself. In July of 2022, Pat Bev, along with 4 other Timberwolves players and a whopping 5 first-round picks, would be traded to the Utah Jazz in exchange for 3-time Defensive Player of the Year Rudy Gobert. When this trade happened, NBA fans were already saying it was one of the worst trades of all time. In the following year, they seem to have been proved correct. But, no individual player seemed to be more screwed over than Pat Bev. He had just become a hero in the eyes of Minnesota fans, yet it was seemingly all for nothing. Pat Bev ended up being traded to the Los Angeles Lakers by the start of the next season, joining All-Stars LeBron James, Anthony Davis, and, ironically, his old rival Russell Westbrook. Due to injuries, players underperforming, and various other reasons, the Lakers were not a very good team when they had Pat Bev, being the 13th seed in the West leading up to the All-Star break. Regardless, Pat Bev did have 2 standout moments. The funniest of the 2 came on January 28th, 2023, in a game against the Celtics. With the game tied up at the end of the 4th quarter, LeBron James would go for the game-winning shot, but be fouled by Jason Tatum. At least, he should have been fouled. The refs didn't call it, and the game went into overtime. This outraged LeBron, who unleashed all of his pent-up anger over the last 20 years of playing in the NBA. While this was already very funny, Pat Bev fueled the situation by doing a bit of sketch comedy. He grabbed a literal camera from a fan sitting on the sidelines, walked up to the referee, and asked him to take a look at the replay so they could clearly see the foul they missed. Unfortunately, the ref was unmoved, and Pat Bev received a technical foul for his behavior. The second certified Pat Bev moment came earlier in the season, where the Lakers were playing against CP3's Phoenix Suns. Phoenix had a 10-point lead, and the ball was in Lakers guard Austin Reeves' hands. Austin Reeves has a similar backstory to Pat Bev. Both players were underdogs coming into the NBA, with Reeves being undrafted and Pat Bev playing 3 years in Europe before joining. But, once they made it in, they found themselves carving out important roles in their team. However, at this time, Reeves was not yet being taken seriously by a lot of the NBA. During the possession, Reeves tried to dribble past Suns shooting guard Devin Booker and then went for a shot. Booker successfully blocked Reeves, but he also hit him square in the face, which should have resulted in Booker being called for a foul immediately. But it does not get called, and the Lakers are forced to play on. This should have been the end of it, but then Suns center DeAndre Ayton makes the mistake of walking up to Reeves and standing over him menacingly. This catches the attention of Pat Bev, who sprints over to Ayton and body checks him to the floor. The Lakers and Suns then kind of try to fight each other, but are quickly separated. Pat Bev and Ayton both get assessed technical fouls, although Pat Bev is also ejected and receives a 3-game suspension after the game. Additionally, the refs do give Devin Booker a foul for hitting Reeves in the face. The public reaction to this incident goes to show how much Pat Bev turned his image around. He used to be the reckless and dirty defensive player you wish would stop annoying your favorite player. Now he is viewed as an enforcer for his teammates, stepping up for them when other players unfairly try to bully their way to a win. When Reeves was smacked in the face by Booker, it was not 6'10" AD, 9-time All-Star Russ, or even 2020 NBA assist leader LeBron James who stood up for him. It was Pat Bev, the 6'2" monster, who struggles to put up 10 points a game. Some NBA fans even said that Pat Bev was the heart and soul of the Lakers team, a statement that aged about as well as the Rudy Gobert trade. In February of 2023, Pat Bev would be traded yet again. Unlike if the Rockets and Timberwolves, who threw Pat Bev on top of a mountain of other players and picks to trade for superstars that did not pan out, I do not fault the Lakers too much for this move. Although Pat Bev still had his moments, he was putting up mediocre numbers even for him. Pat Bev ended up joining his hometown team, the Chicago Bulls, for the remainder of the season, and he would start every game he played for them. The Bulls would make the play-in tournament with Pat Bev, but he fell short of his play-in MVP expectations, and the Bulls were unable to make the playoffs. Pat Bev did have one memorable moment with the Bulls that is worth mentioning. A little over 1 month after switching teams, the Bulls would play against the Lakers in an important late-season matchup. The Bulls managed to win the game, with the last points coming from Pat Bev, who scored on 2014 All-Defensive second-team member LeBron James. Despite them having been teammates 30 days ago, Pat Bev still decided to troll and call LeBron too short to his face. After the season, Pat Bev signed with the 76ers for a 1-year deal, reuniting with old teammate James Harden if only for a few days. And while maybe he'll have the season of his life next year and change his legacy forever, I think we are starting to reach the end of Pat Bev's career. He is 34, and he experienced a significant decline in numbers last season. While offense was never his strong suit in the NBA, it's getting hard to justify signing 6-point per game Pat Bev to your team when there are dozens of younger players who can score more points while maintaining a high level of defensive play. Pat Bev could still win a championship or make a deep playoff run, but if he does, I'm guessing he'll be more like 2020 Dwight Howard and not 2014 Tim Duncan. A few weeks ago, 2023 second overall pick Brandon Miller was at a press conference when he was asked to give his thoughts on the Michael Jordan versus LeBron James GOAT debate. Brandon Miller said,
"No, because I actually don't think LeBron is, the GOAT of basketball. I think my GOAT of basketball is Paul George. I always grew up watching him, so it's never just LeBron."
A lot of people on Twitter took issue with this take, and I completely understand why. Paul George is straight up not as good as Michael Jordan or LeBron James. In fact, you could probably name a dozen players in the NBA right now who are better than him. But I think a lot of people do not understand what Miller is trying to say. Paul George may not objectively be the best player of all time, but Paul George is a player that has meant the most to Brandon Miller. Miller grew up watching him, fell in love with his game, and he tries to model his own play style after George. Saying that Jordan, LeBron, or anyone else is his GOAT would be disingenuous, since he idolizes George way more than any other player. Other people may not hold that opinion, but at the end of the day, why should Brandon Miller, or anyone for that matter, care? Only you have full control over what players you like, what players you dislike, and what player you think is the GOAT. Tyler the Creator put it best when talking about rap music fans giving their top 5 artists or albums of all time. Is Pat Bev objectively the GOAT of basketball? God no. According to Basketball Reference, he has a 0.002% chance of making the Basketball Hall of Fame. But, is he one of the funniest players? Yes. Is he one of the most entertaining? Yes. Is he my favorite player? Maybe. Miller raised a good point about Paul George. But seriously, I have touched on this earlier in the video, but Pat Bev is a person who was never supposed to make it to the NBA. While he is more talented than the average person, at any given time, you can find a couple dozen players who are better than Pat Bev in any area of basketball. It's easy to find better basketball players than Pat Bev, but it is difficult to find a basketball player who loves the game more than him. Pat Bev has made the most of what he was given and then some. He became a ruthless pest on defense, never deviating from his one goal of making the game unbearable for the other team. It does not matter if the person he is guarding is a first-year unproven rookie or the reigning NBA MVP. He is going to try and stop them at any cost. Pat Bev's playstyle has resulted in some of the most entertaining moments I have ever seen watching basketball. His countless feuds with NBA superstars, his penchant for obtaining ridiculously obvious technical fouls in rapid succession, and his never-ending barrage of taunts and trash talk make Pat Bev an infinitely more interesting player than most superstars in the league today. Has he made some stupid decisions? Yes, but he has also cleaned up his image over time and turned public opinion in his favor. He is no longer the annoying bully who plays rough to make up for his lack of talent. He is the beloved team player who steps in for his teammates when they are put down, and who challenges star players who think they are better than they are. I want to return to the 2022 Timberwolves vs Clippers play-in game, a game that meant very little to most people, but meant the world to Pat Bev. This was the game where he could prove to the NBA once and for all that he was not a joke. He could prove that the Clippers, and by extension any team before or after them, made a huge mistake by letting him go. While the Clippers, along with the Rockets and Timberwolves, all failed to actually capitalize off of their blockbuster trades, Pat Bev reminded the NBA that he was not some random clown. He was Patrick Beverley. Who cares if he has virtually no chance in making the Basketball Hall of Fame? At the end of the day, he was entertaining, and that's the best thing an athlete can be. Thank you for watching.
Tell everybody, yeah, you can tell